There's so much focus, especially during this pandemic, about our mental health and our bodies and getting exercise. But one topic a lot of people are not talking about or addressing is the health of our brain, especially as we all age, which is happening to all of us each and every day. So to dig a little or dive a little deeper into this topic, let's go ahead and bring in Lynn Breuer. She's the Director of Community Outreach and Wellness for the Jewish Family Service of Metro Detroit. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being with us on the Oakland County MegaCast.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
You know, it's not easy aging. These 20-something-year-olds don't get it, but eventually they will.
I agree. There's one client I used to work with, and I'll never forget his quote. He used to say, "Aging ain't for sissies." And I'm telling you, the older I get, the more I think, oh, he called it right.
Right. And for us that have had loved ones that have suffered from dementia or Alzheimer's, you kind of get that impact of, the importance of our brain health because you're seeing and you're experiencing that decline on a firsthand basis. But when we're in our 20s, 30s, and 40s, a lot of us aren't talking about that. So you're the expert here. What should people be doing at an earlier age? Because we talk about good nutrition and good health and exercising, but no one is really talking about what we should be doing at an early age to help our brain age as well.
Absolutely. And at any age, Ronnie, there are things that people can do. So whether we're 20, 40, 50, 70, it's never too late to try and take care of our brain health. I think the most important place to start is to understand that there's no stigma to notice that things aren't the same as they used to be. People might see small changes in memory, small changes in our visual spatial area, which you might notice as, wow, I don't park quite as well as I used to park. I pulled up a little too close, or I didn't pull up close enough in that space. Or I read, and by the time I'm ready to turn the page, I realize I don't know a thing that I read. I stopped paying attention. This is all normal and nothing to be afraid of. But just like we're not surprised if we might start to need reading classes as we get a little bit older, sometimes in our 40s, it's not surprising to notice these changes and that our brains will respond if we really put our minds to it. The most important thing we can do is to give ourselves new cognitive challenges. So things that we don't typically do. For example, if someone loves crossword puzzles, it's fun to do that for entertainment, but it's not helping our brain health. If we pick up something that we've never done before, we don't know how to do, and our brains really have to fight to figure it out, that helps us take advantage of our body's ability for neuroplasticity, to make new connections in our brains, even as we're getting older.
But do you find that sometimes too, when you're older and you're trying to pick up these new skills or learn new things, people get frustrated because they are not picking it up or learning it as quick as they once did, so they just give up?
Absolutely, it can be frustrating. And that's why the more we talk about the fact that there's benefit only when things are hard versus when things are easy, it helps people to set their expectations, because we really don't like to do things we don't feel good at.
So with that, Lynn Breuer with us here on the Oakland County MegaCast. She's the Director of Community Outreach and Wellness for the Jewish Family Services of Metropolitan Detroit. With that, Lynn, what can people be doing and what age should they be starting this?
So you can start at any age. The bigger you build your cognitive reserve, think of that as a bank account of all the deposits you make in terms of intellectual stimulation, going to a museum, learning a foreign language, playing a musical instrument, taking a new class. Those are all things that help us, which will help us more if we have a little bit of decline later in life. A stronger step that people can take would be engaging in cognitive training classes. And that's something we see people starting as young, perhaps as 50, and going all the way up into the 90s. And that's curriculum. That's something that's evidence-based, that's been studied with people taking screenings before the training and after the training. And you can actually see some improvements in people's cognition, or people who had been on quite a decline, leveling off and slowing down that decline.
So what I will say, I think a lot of parents with this remote learning right now are learning that maybe it's taking them a little bit longer to learn things as well, along with their kids, because, fifth grade math is not what it was when we went to school. They have the new math. And so there are things that people are having a harder time to grasp as they get older. So what tips do you say to those people, especially parents right now, trying to remote train and help their kids with their schoolwork?
Well, I would first of all tell them to take care of themselves, right? The stress and the pressure that we're all under doesn't help our brain health at all. So if they're having a bad day, instead of beating themselves up about it, it's important to be gentle with themselves and to get help where they need it. But it's not just that parent at home that's noticing changes. The social isolation that's coming with the pandemic is causing many people, despite their age, to have so much less socialization than we're used to. And that means sometimes we have less access to our rich vocabularies. It takes us longer to get just the right thought and just the right word. And so people are noticing changes at 20 and 30 and 40 that we wouldn't expect to see until later. So again, to understand that's a little bit of a side effect of the pandemic, and to do all they can to fight back.
And so when I am maybe on the younger scale, 30s and 40s, and I'm noticing this more because of COVID-19 and this crazy world that we're living in right now, what can I do to recognize it, but also to change it? Can you retrain your brain and make it healthy again, just like we do our bodies?
Right. That's a great question. And absolutely, there are things you can do about it. So first of all, preventively, if people eat a diet that's rich in antioxidants and omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, that's helpful. To exercise at least 3 hours a week aerobically, if that's safe for someone to do so, if your doctor approves that, that's very helpful. There's a whole host of preventive measures, including stress management, because chronic stress actually shrinks and impairs the function of our hippocampus, which is one of the memory centers in our brain. So we don't want that to go on unaddressed. But the single best step that people can take is to really engage in a form of cognitive training. And again, someone in their 20s, I think perhaps it's too early for that. But 40s on, it's a little bit of a time commitment for a few months to yourself to really fight back against some of the changes we're experiencing due to the pandemic and normal aging combined.
Why do you think we're not talking about this more as a society?
I think because there's such a stigma about it. There used to be such a stigma talking about mental health issues, and perhaps there still are stigma attached in some circles. But for many people, they don't want to say, I'm having trouble with my memory. I'm having a hard time finding my words. We go to a worst case scenario in our head. We're afraid we have dementia or an Alzheimer's disease, or that our employers or our friends might view us as somehow less capable than we were before. And that's why I'm so glad to be here today, to be able to share the news that this is normal. It happens to anyone who's lucky enough to live a long life. And we're seeing it a little bit more accelerated during the pandemic. So if we can take that stigma away, that would be great.
So Lynn, how do you know when you're starting to notice these things, how do you know when it's time to address it and get help, or just take notice of it?
So that's a great question. And it depends on the type of help you're talking about. One of the things people struggle with is, how do they know if the changes they're experiencing are normal, signs of an aging brain, which still you can address, you can still fight back against it, or when do they need to get help from a doctor, from a neurologist? So that answer really depends on if the changes people are noticing are significant enough to interfere with their ability to function. So if my issues with language or my issues with my memory stop me from being able to function at work, stop me from being able to function in a volunteer capacity or socially, that's no longer considered normal, and that's something to reach out to a physician about. Anything else, it's nuisance, it's concerning, you don't have to accept it. There's a whole host of steps people can take, and I think you have our contact information. People can reach out to us for more specifics, but as long as people's functioning on a daily basis is unimpacted, it's not worrisome and needing acute medical attention.
And with that, though, so for a lot of people, they don't want to recognize it in themselves, but maybe family members are starting to notice things. When should family members, how do they even approach the subject? Because it can be a testy subject, right? An uncomfortable topic for people to discuss. So when should a family member actually jump in and try to get a loved one help?
It's a great question. And it's so individual. It depends on the personality of the person who's having difficulty, right? If there's someone who's really proactive and has always lived a proactive life, I think people can be a straight shooter and talk to that person early on and say, hey, I'm noticing some changes, maybe to your memory. Is it just me, or have you noticed some things? Maybe I'm just being worrisome, right? But if it's someone who you think isn't as proactive and is likely to be concerned about hearing that, it's a little bit easier to talk about yourself first and say, I'm noticing these last few months, my memory's not what it used to be. Are you having any of that as well? It's a nice way to open the door. And the timing of that really depends on when someone is concerned enough to think it's time to talk about it, right? There is a phase when we can just watch it and see if there's any changes, because maybe someone's having a bad day, a bad week even. But if something is going on and there's a consistent pattern, consistent trend, it's best to address it, because there are steps that can be taken, whether the changes are normal or due to a dementia. And the earlier people can start using interventions, the better off it will be ultimately.
Yeah, we hear that with so many other health conditions as well. Early intervention is the best help for you and your body. And with that, Lynn, quickly before we let you go, can you share with us how can people reach out and get help as well?
Absolutely. So for information about cognitive training, they can call our telephone number, which is 248-788-MIND, MIND, or they can also send an email to mindu, so MINDU, at jfsdetroit.org. If people need more supportive help to talk with a geriatric social worker or for mental health counseling, we have that as well. And they can call our resource center at 248-592-2313. We'll be happy to help.
I think the big thing in all of this is it's okay to reach out and ask for help and at least do some research and start the process.
Absolutely.
The one thing COVID-19 and this crisis has taught us is that life is not normal as we used to know it. And it's okay, more so now than ever, to reach out, talk to people, and address some of these issues that you're having. So, Lynn, thank you so much for being with us and taking time out of your day to talk about this important topic here on the Oakland County MegaCast.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.